podcast advertising, filled with tons of opportunities for revenue, formats, tools, services, and terminology. It can feel like a mammoth-sized beast for the average podcaster. In this video, we're going to demystify podcast advertising and cover some essential components that you need to know as a creator. When we are talking about podcast ads, there are three primary ad types that you will more than likely run into. Let's take a look at both the pros and cons of each of these ad types from both the podcaster perspective as well as the advertiser perspective. Baked-in ads, dynamic host read ads, and programmatic ads. Baked-in ads are very simply any ad that has been edited into the original MP3 file. These ads are typically host-read and sound natural within the original recording. These can feel extremely sincere to your audience about the product that you're endorsing, and some brands are willing to pay a premium for this opportunity. The drawback with this ad type is just that these ads live within your original content. Special offers or deals within your ad could expire by the time your audience actually discovers your episode. Also, if you and your advertiser ever break up, your episodes won't. Or maybe you decide to run a series of ads with a competitor. Are they really going to want to run ads with you if your back catalog is filled with nothing but ads from their competition? The only way to solve this would be to re-edit your old episodes, and nobody wants to do that. Dynamic host read ads solve this problem. Services like Libsyn allow you to create ad markers within your episode and record a naturally sounding host read ad that blends in seamlessly with your episode. The benefits? These ads sound like a natural endorsement. Because it is. You also retain complete control over what advertiser you want to work with. And it doesn't last forever. Switch advertisers in 6 months? No problem. Just re-record that ad and swap it at the ad marker within your episode. No heartbreak or extra editing required. Dynamic ads provide an array of benefits to you, the host, including enhanced functionality with attribution tools, more on that later, and the ability to accommodate time-sensitive campaigns in a more efficient manner. That being said, download requirements for these types of ads are usually higher. And honestly, that makes sense. Big brands want a bigger reach. Now, programmatic ads work a little bit differently than either baked-in ads or dynamic host read ads. These ads are usually pre-produced by an outside agency and are grouped together into specific IAB categories. When you sign up for programmatic ads, such as Libsyn's auto ads, your podcast is grouped together with similar podcasts that share a common audience. Just like dynamic ads, you still pick ad slots with ad markers, but you do not have the opportunity to approve of the advertiser. The major benefit of these ads are just that the download barrier for entry is much lower because these shows are aggregated together. On top of that, these ads give you the ability to passively monetize your podcast. You're not required to physically sit down and re-record a new host-read ad. The only requirement is the inclusion of dynamic ad markers upon uploading a new episode. Check the link in the description to learn more about the requirements to join the Libsyn Auto Ads program. Now, before we start placing ads all over our podcast episodes, seriously, please don't do that. Here are some common ad spots you may want to consider. Pre-roll. These ads are placed before the podcast episode runs, or within the first few minutes of an episode. Post-roll. These ads are placed after the episode has completed. And mid-roll. These ad spots are placed during the actual episode runtime. Placement of your ad is individual to every podcaster, as you really need to strike a balance between how many ads you want to occur within your episode and how many ads your audience may want to listen to. The number of ads that you do include in your episode will directly impact your possible earnings. Just offering pre- and post-roll ads with zero mid-roll ads does mean that you might be leaving money on the table. A good rule of thumb to follow: the shorter the episode is, the less ad slots you have available. The longer the episode is, the more opportunities there are for the inclusion of additional ad slots. Knowing the ad type and placement is one thing, But let's talk about the really big elephant in the room: money, or more or less how podcasters get paid for ad spots. Podcast ad rates are calculated using a model called CPM. CPM stands for cost per mil, or cost per thousand. For podcasters, this means that you get paid per 1,000 ad impressions. Like everything else, CPM rates fluctuate with brands' budgets, economic factors, and seasonality. Keep this in mind as you project revenue. Like every business, your ad revenue will likely fluctuate. If you're going through all the trouble of placing ad markers within your episodes and you're working with brands, it's important to understand payouts. After all, you're hoping to make some cash. So let's say you sign up for an ad spot that will play for 1 month, and the going CPM rate is currently $20. During our month, we release our episodes bi-weekly. Episode 1 gets 1,000 impressions. Episode 2 gets 250 impressions. This means that episode 1 got us $20 of ad revenue, and episode 2 only netted us about $5 worth of ad revenue, giving us a grand total of $25 of ad revenue for the entire month. This is not taking into account taxes or the percentage taken in by the platforms. Many platforms also have a minimum payout threshold that must be reached to issue payment, which typically is around the $20 to $30 range. If you can't reach that minimum threshold, it may be months before you see any money from your ads. While working with ads, you might run into a few terms that might leave you a bit puzzled. Impressions are a common one, especially if you have worked with YouTube Studio in the past. Impressions, when referring to podcast ads, represent the number of times that an ad was delivered and listened to in totality in a given episode. This term is only used when referring to dynamically inserted ads, never baked-in ads, and they serve as a more accurate alternative to download numbers. Impressions offer a more precise view of how many people heard a specific ad by taking into account variables such as listener drop-off and skipped ads. Let's say your latest podcast episode was downloaded 100 times. Inevitably, some of your listeners may have chose to skip through some of the ads. And speaking of measuring performance, attribution is the term used when referring to tracking the performance of an ad. There are two primary means of attribution: pixel tracking and prefix tracking. Pixel tracking uses a piece of code in a dynamically inserted ad and a corresponding code on an advertiser's website. When an audience member listens to an ad with pixel tracking, that counts as an impression. When they visit the advertiser's website, that impression becomes a conversion. Prefix tracking uses a piece of code placed on the RSS feed called a prefix. This prefix connects to an external tracking service, such as PodTrack. Now, is attribution required to place ads? No. But more and more advertisers are requesting that attribution be included when placing larger ad buys. Now, let's say that your ad does not perform as well as you had hoped. Maybe you had told the advertiser that you were expecting 10,000 impressions, and your ad only netted about 5,000 impressions. In this case, you might be required to provide what is called a make good. Make goods are typically additional requests by an advertiser to fill the gap of an underperforming ad. These could be additional ads outside of the scope of the original ad buy, or maybe even social media posts mentioning the advertiser. Basically anything that will make good on the promise of the ad buy. Whew. Brain exploding yet? Now, given all this information, the question has to be asked: is your podcast ready for ads? Keep in mind these key points when answering this question. Do you have the time to deploy ads? Managing ads is another task on top of producing your podcast. You'll now be responsible for recording those dynamically inserted host-read ads. Also, placing ad markers that make sense within your episodes might be an additional time suck that you're not ready to commit to. Do you have a large enough base of listeners? Remember that industry marketplaces do have download thresholds necessary to join those programs. Even programmatic offerings such as Libsyn's auto ads that do cater to smaller shows do have thresholds that may be out of reach for some shows. And remember our math lesson. If you do go with ads, it may be months before you receive any payout because you haven't reached those minimum thresholds. Adding podcast ads should be a worthwhile investment for you and the brand. That being said, if you are dead set on ads, there is nothing to stop you from pursuing sponsorship or ads on your own, even if your download numbers do not meet certain thresholds. You can reach out to small businesses in your area that align to your podcast's chosen niche and broker the ad deal yourself. Or you can find other ways of monetizing that don't involve ads. Libsyn's podcast subscriptions offerings are designed with this in mind, and they are integrated within the Libsyn dashboard under settings. By offering premium content to your listeners, you don't have to worry about tracking, ad spots, or make goods. It's all about serving your audience the content that they want and giving you complete control over your own monetization. Has your show started down the path of podcast advertising? Let us know down in the comments how you've navigated the world of podcast ads. What has worked well for you and your show? I'm Brian Coddington with Libsyn, and remember, keep podcasting.